How do you know when a relationship has become serious? Or how do you know when to take your relationship more seriously? I have a different approach as to how to take things more serious, but let's first make the delineation between what is a serious matter. Its very definition is something that demands more consideration or more considerate application as opposed to a light-hearted one. Another way of looking at taking something more seriously is how people feel about it, taking things with a heavy approach versus a light approach. By my estimation, seldom do things require a heavy approach. Most things, if not all things, require a light approach to it, a light-handed approach to life. All of relationship is merely managed. So how do you know how to manage your relationship? You manage it at the level at which it requires its management. You manage it where it is, where that relationship is. Remember how we talked about in other videos? My model of relationships is built on the intimacy model of relationship, intimacy being how well you know the person. And the more you know the person, the more intimate you become. Now, it doesn't mean that the more intimate you become, the more it requires more serious approach to it. It means that you're now more intimate. But a relationship is managed where the relationship is. And so you manage the relationship at what point? You manage it where it requires more management. You manage it based on an agreement by agreement basis. You manage it on a dynamic by dynamic basis. If your dynamic changes into something that requires more of your consideration, you manage it as such. If your relationship has acquired more and more agreements, then you manage it as such. And then at some point, you'll manage it that requires more of your consideration because it merits its consideration. For example, let's make the agreement, hey, let's meet up at 7 p.m. tonight, or let's meet up at 7 p.m. on Friday night. Does that work for you? Works for me. Because scheduling is one of the primary challenges of relationships or building more and more intimate relationships. The more intimate you become, the more you'd like to schedule more things together. And scheduling is a primary challenge. And so you agree, yes, you do. So you manage it by that point. And at this point, all you have to really manage is the time. What are some things you have to manage when you're setting up your scheduling? Well, you manage the scheduling of the time, you manage the approach, the expectation management. What do they need to expect at this moment? What do I need to expect at this moment? And what do they need to know what to expect? And what can I expect of them? The three expectation managements that you have to manage. And so that's what merits your management. And none of this requires a heavy approach, even when you've come to a point in the relationship where there are a lot of things that you're managing. You're managing their expectations of you, your expectations of them, and what they can expect of you. You're managing what things you have to take on together with each other. For example, you have taken on a mortgage together, or you've taken on a living situation together. What things do you have to manage? Now, there are a lot of things you're managing, yet still doesn't ever require a heavy approach. It could be taken with a light-hearted approach, a fun approach to it. Seldom do things, even in the most dire of times, require a heavy approach. When you take a light approach to life, none of that stuff requires a heavy approach. Giving things more consideration can be taken with a light-hearted or light approach. So what did you learn from this video? You learned that seldom do things require a heavy approach. Most things can be taken with a light approach, even things that require more of your consideration. You can take things lightly, and seldom do you need to take things seriously. And you manage a relationship based on first understanding the premise that all of relationship is managed, whether or not it's sexual, whether it's a professional, whether it's a social one, whether it's a friendship. You just manage the relationship where it's at, where it's merited in that relationship. You manage what requires managing. You manage the dynamic whatever the dynamic requires, or whatever the arrangement requires, you manage the communication from that point. And you manage in essence, you manage a relationship based on where it's at and what merits in that relationship your management and your attention and your consideration, and none of which requires a heavy-handed approach. If this makes sense, leave a like, leave a comment, leave a heart, and leave a comment if you have any inputs or questions, or what your thoughts are. I would love to hear them. Share this video with other people. It'll help make the world a better place for all of us. I'll talk to you in the next video. Bye.